Dennis is so Chicago. So I identify him so intensely with Chicago that in order to have a movie that felt, as authentic and genuine as we wanted it to, that we had to set it in Chicago. So there was a whole process of resituating it in Chicago, and Dennis helped a lot with that. And the look and the feel, I mean, we really we wanted it to feel very much like a movie that you would have seen in, like the early 70s. When the studios were making these very gritty, dramas with, it was the birth of the anti-hero, and films like Friends of Eddie Coyle with Robert Mitchum, The Killing of a Chinese Bookie, Midnight Cowboy, where things were, they were dirty, very, very gritty, and that's what we really wanted Chicago to show Chicago in a way that you don't see a lot. It wasn't about the Sears Tower and all that stuff. It was like the little back alleys and the old neighborhoods and stuff. So that was the inspiration as far as the look and feel of the movie.
And Dennis, when Joe says when they got Dennis, what attracted you to the project? What made you sign on and say, yeah, I'm down with it?
The script right away, and I didn't want to go through the Lincoln Tunnel every day. But it was the script. I think it's always ultimately the script, no matter what you do. And I knew in the first 5 or 10 pages that I wanted to do it. I thought it was a great character. I always say this, when he comes out of the hospital, he goes to a bar instead of anybody picking him up or anything like that. I like that attractive. That's what I do.
And you became integral obviously to moving to Chicago, but then it's your hometown. So did you guide the production as to where to shoot? Was there part of that?
Well, we had a location manager. Took us around different neighborhoods, but I think we picked a few that I knew, but we had a really good location manager, and some of the alleys and everything I knew about. I ran around when I was a kid and through the buildings and under the viaducts and stuff. You call them viaducts? You call them viaducts, yeah. And on the different ramps and stuff like that. It was fun. It's fun for me to shoot there because I live there, but I haven't worked there in a long time. And when I read the script, I thought if we can move it to Chicago, I was going to try my hardest to do that. But once Joe saw Chicago and we fed him,
we actually looked neighborhood after neighborhood after neighborhood all day. And this was like the second day. I mean, it was as if we had driven from Chicago to Denver or something. We were in the car for that long. And the second day, Joe was like, Dennis said his favorite slice of pizza is over here, and I think we're close by. Or his favorite sheet pizza is what he called it. And so we went, and we're sitting there eating the pizza, which is incredible. It's called the Mottos, if anybody's ever in Chicago. But, and Joe's looking around, and he's like, I think this might be it. And that ended up being sort of the sort of nerve center of where we were.
It was also, when I looked up, I had my greasy sausage sheet pizza in my hand, and I looked up and we were standing on the corner of Grand and May Street, and I thought, okay, we're meant to be in this neighborhood. So, and it was absolutely perfect because it was an old Italian neighborhood that it didn't feel like an old Italian neighborhood really anymore, with the exception of D'Amato's, and there was a place next door called Barry Brothers, which is an old grocery and butcher and submarine sandwich shop. But it was becoming gentrified, and you could really see how a guy like Joe May could still be living there, but is being sort of driven out slowly over the years. So it was absolutely perfect, and it was then right nearby the market, the meat market stuff, and it just worked out perfectly. We didn't have to move very much at all when we were shooting, so it was the sheet pizza that saved the day.
I was just there the other day. I got cookies and I brought them to my sister's house.
You got cookies.
The bakery, but they serve
But that neighborhood also, it was like, because Joe kind of wrote the script with, if you guys know Williamsburg, with like the Williamsburg of 1992. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's like the early 90s Williamsburg. And by the time we ended up shooting it, Williamsburg in Brooklyn has become, you know, sort of the world's capital of gentrification, and it's changed so much, I think, just from when Joe wrote it. But this was a neighborhood where you could still see the change, the way in Chicago, you know, the way that it was happening in Will. I think it was closer to what you had in mind in a lot of ways. So.
I can continue to ask questions, but if there are questions from the audience, we'll start doing that. Yes, ma'am. He's bringing you a microphone.
Can you talk a little bit about the use of Italian opera in the background? It's an integral part of the movie. May is not an Italian name, however.
Sure, very smart question.
Well, May means Maggio. So, yeah, okay, yeah. That's another story, why it's called the Last Rites of Joe Maggio. But the opera, for me, at the time that I was writing it, my mother-in-law, who was very, very much into opera and has season tickets to the Met, but lives in Boston and doesn't actually go very often. So my wife and I end up going to the opera a lot, and I kind of got into opera, but also, the film very much is about my grandfather, who was my mother's father, who was this kind of Joe May-esque character, and he was this he was just this man of contradictions, and capable of incredibly noble acts one minute, and then something so petty, the next. He was this larger than life character. But one of the things she talks about growing up is hearing him in his back shed working on something and listening to Caruso. So I thought it would mean a lot to my mother if I had the Caruso in there, first of all. But also, I thought it was interesting for Joe as a character that, he's this guy, he has a public persona that he believes his public persona is one thing, but everyone else sees him in a completely different way. They treat him very much as this disposable, loser almost. But they don't know that this guy, has these tastes. He's moved, to tears by opera, and he understands about the pigeons, for example. He's very much into those. And pigeons are remarkable animals, but again, they're animals that are treated like rats, like rats with wings. But if you know anything about pigeons, they are really amazing birds. They can do amazing things. You take a pigeon from its home and drive it cross country and drop it in California, and within 2 days it'll be back. It'll find its way back somehow. And so I just thought it was just a character trait that I liked for Joe, that he had this taste in opera, that no one would know about it, but the audience. So.
Yes, over here.
Hi, yes, I have a question. It's been a while since I've seen a film in which an article of clothing becomes almost a character. Could you talk about that jacket a little bit, how you decided to use it? Whose idea was that? And, it's a thread throughout the movie, of course, but I just want to know what your thoughts are.
Our wardrobe lady came through with a lot of stuff. I told this story last night, so I'll just repeat it. Years ago, I did a movie called Get Shorty, and I remember seeing a pink sport coat, and I thought, this is Ray Bones. This sport coat is Ray Bones. And when the wardrobe ladies for Joe May were bringing in all of these choices for the leather jackets, I saw that leather jacket, and I said, I think this is Joe May. And I said, if Maggio likes it, I'm gonna wear it. And it became his thing. People they want to buy it and he won't sell it. I think he holds on to it as a piece of life more than a piece of clothing. But yeah, it's one of those things when you see it, I
think in the script we had that it was a coat that was just too thin for the weather, and that but he felt he looked good in it. So for a guy like Joe, you know, that was the most important thing. But then you saw that, I remember when you saw the coat,